Welcome to another edition of Office Hours with State Representative John Hampton. I'm John Hampton, and I'm thrilled you could join me today. Simsbury today, Canton today, and Avon today. There's one man covering these towns and all that's going on with these new publications. I'm thrilled to welcome Bruce Deckert, editor, publisher, and Renaissance man. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us. I'm holding editions of Today and Simsbury Today, and I thought give you an opportunity to talk about all these exciting publications, how they came to be, a little bit about your background, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity and the invitation. Yeah.
So what's your background? You've been in Simsbury how long?
So I've lived in Simsbury for almost 25 years, and I've worked in the media for about the same time frame. For most of that time, I was an editor at ESPN.com, just down the road in Bristol. Before that, I was a newspaper editor and reporter, also here in Connecticut. And ironically, my first journalism job here in Connecticut was with the old imprint papers that I'm sure you remember, and many residents who've been here for more than 20 or 25 years will remember the old Simsbury News, Avon News, Canton News, Farmington News. Each town in the valley
had their own
dedicated weekly paper. Right.
Yeah, and then sadly we lost that.
Right, and that's exactly that. They went by the wayside, and so I looked at the media landscape here in the valley, and I thought, I thought, and I still think that there's a place at the table to bring community journalism back in a town-focused way, and so that's the thinking behind introducing these magazines.
So when did you start? I think you started with Canton Today. How long ago?
Canton Today debuted. So we started the process early in 2018, and then Canton Today debuted in October of 2018. Then we introduced the Avon and Simsbury publications in April. So at that point we had three essentially distinct print. So they're print and digital monthly magazines. And then for July, we actually streamlined. So we went from a 3-magazine model to a 1-magazine model. I had a couple of local residents and business owners tell me in the past couple of months, why don't you just do 1 magazine instead of 3 for each town, with the idea that, there are not walls at these town lines, that we're kind of all in it together.
Oh, and, so you've switched over to one publication.
Exactly.
Okay, so is this the first edition of Today?
Exactly.
Which covers Avon, Canton, and Simsbury.
Right, and so you can see that we've retained the branding of each town on the cover. Inside the magazine, there are separate sections for each magazine. So there's an Avon Today section, a Canton Today section, and a Simsbury Today section. But it made sense on a number of fronts to streamline, and so that's what we're doing.
So moving forward, it'll be
Today magazine covering Avon, Canton, and Simsbury, and then with a distinct section inside for in each edition of the magazine.
Great.
Right.
Now, in this day and age of everything being digital, as you mentioned earlier, was it daunting to come up with an actual hard copy publication? I love to read anything hard copy now. Mm-hmm. I do go online, but was that kind of a concern going into it, that nobody's going to read something hard copy?
That's a great question, and there have been a handful of people who have questioned me about that. As I met with local business owners when I was working to launch Canton Today, a couple of people questioned me, like, why are you going into print? With the idea that isn't print dead, quote unquote. I think the answer to that is that, well, on the one hand, certainly the internet has affected print. That's pretty obvious. I think it's affected newspapers more than magazines. I think that a full-color glossy magazine, which is what we're producing, I think this has shelf life. I think it appeals to people in the quality, the photos pop, the ads pop, the content just looks sharp relative to a newsprint. So I think that the internet has not affected magazines to the extent that it's affected newspapers. But I also believe that, and I'm not sure it's a generational thing only, I think people like sometimes to hold something tangible.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are millennials, and they say to me, Dad, sometimes I get tired of looking at the phone. I want to hold something in my hand,
Yeah.
And so, I print has been affected by the internet, but I don't think print's going away, and I think there really is a place for both. And so that's what we're doing. We're basically offering the best of both worlds. We have a digital edition and a print edition.
So I can go on and read the whole thing?
Yep, you can go online. You can go to our website. We post.
What's your website?
Today, www.todaypublishing.net.
Okay.
www.todaypublishing.net. And we also post it across our social media. We're a member of, there are 9 different Facebook groups that I'm aware of, and if other people know of more, please let me know. But there are 9 different Facebook groups that are connected with these 3 towns, 3 for each town. So we're posting the digital edition across all that social media, all those groups, LinkedIn. So yes, we do our best to distribute this so people can read the magazine, of course.
How many do you publish each month?
So our circulation is almost 25,000 addresses, and so that's one. The circulation is a term that might be misunderstood. I know I've wondered in the past, does that mean how many people are reading it? Does that mean how many people it's being delivered to? So the industry term for circulation means it's the addresses it's being mailed to. So our circulation is almost 25,000. It's about 24,750, give or take a little bit, month to month. That number is actually, so I'll make a little pitch for our print circulation. To my knowledge, and again, I've been in town here for almost 25 years, to my knowledge, there is not another local publication that is mailing to every address in these 3 communities. Typically, they're mailing to single-family homes, sometimes a subset of single-family homes. We're mailing to all the single-family homes, all the businesses, all the P.O. boxes, and all the apartments. And to my knowledge, that really sets our print distribution apart. And one of the things that dovetails with is the idea of community journalism. And we're really aiming for community journalism at its best. And to my thinking, community journalism, to truly be community journalism, needs to be accessible to everybody in the community. So that's what we're able to do, and I'm glad we have that model.
They're also placed around town, correct? No,
Yes.
like the libraries and
Right.
and things like that.
We will drop them at strategic locations in Simsbury, Avon, and Canton. It isn't always the same places month to month, but it could be a library, it could be a grocery store, a senior center, different places like that, local businesses.
How's the response been so far?
Well, I mean, you would expect the publisher and editor to say we've gotten a great response. I mean, we've gotten a great response, and it really has been encouraging because, as any of us know, when you invest in something and kind of really pour yourself into it, it's encouraging when you hear people say, "Hey, the magazine looks good." Appreciate the article, the layout looks great. So we really had a good response, and I've appreciated hearing that from the community.
Great covers. This is one of my favorite.
Thank you.
Pictures, because I know Mr. Benjamin, a great man and a great story.
Yes.
That was really terrific. I think
Thank
he's
you.
102 now.
He turned 102 on June 2nd.
And of course, who could not like Flaming Farm on the cover? And then on the back you have bears, which is
right.
That really sums up Simsbury. But so how do you get your ideas for covers? Come to you in your sleep? How does that work?
They're a good question. We don't lack for good story ideas. That is certain. And one of this may anticipate a question you're going to ask me, but I think one of the fair critiques of the media in general is, why always the downside? Why always the negative?
Yeah.
And it's not always, but so often, occasionally, once in a blue moon, I'll watch the TV news. I think it's true enough of TV news. I'll listen to the radio news. And 3, 4, 5 stories in a row are, there's an assault, there's a homicide, there's a scandal. And there's no question that's news. I mean, when something difficult happens in somebody's life, that is news. So I agree with that. But that's not the only news that's going on in the valley, in Avon, Simsbury, and Canton. There's so many good stories that are happening that most of us have no clue about. You know,
absolutely.
And so you know, as I just talk with people around these, you know, across the Tri-Town area, you know, residents, business owners, people, you know, tell me what's going on, and I think, oh, that's a great idea for a cover story. I mean, I have a list of cover stories that, you know, could take us 2 years down the road. And,
I bet.
and so yeah, so it's there's no lack for great things to cover.
So really focusing on positive human interest stories. I think you started with Chief Baldus. Was that your first cover? Jim
Right,
Baldus?
yeah, so our debut, when we launched the Avon and Simsbury magazines, we focused on the volunteer fire departments in each town. So we on the Simsbury cover was Chief Baldus, who has been the chief for about 15 years here in town.
Great guy.
In Canton, Bruce Lockwood is the chief, and in Avon, it's Bruce Appel.
Okay.
So in this case, I was the other Bruce.
Yeah, the other Bruce.
But so each of them was on the cover of their debut magazine, and that was great. And I want to put also plug our photographer, a gentleman named Seishu Bedranath. Seishu Photography is his kind of his family brand, and his business brand, which he uses for our magazine, is Connecticut Headshots. And I've gotten so many great reviews of the photography.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, he is phenomenal.
I noticed you got a great story on Mary Lou Cobb from the Montessori School, another great Simsbury story. Great pictures there. This other picture of Mr. Benjamin in there, really terrific.
That's Seishu, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a great eye.
Yeah.
And so that's great. He's part of your team.
Yeah.
So do you have a big team, or is it you, yourself, and and your photographer? Or
we have
growing.
We have contributing writers. It's a community journalism model. So you know, when I meet with residents, when I meet with business owners, I'm letting people know we want you to send us your news. You know, we want to, you know, basically, you know, what's the New York Times? All the news that fits, we print, or all the news that's fit to print.
Yeah.
You know, we want to fit as much news as possible. You know, to spread the good stuff that's going on, and again, you know, we're looking to report the underreported upside of these three towns. I mean, that's the news philosophy, and that doesn't mean, you know, we're not going to shy away from, you know, if we can tackle an issue and then help move it forward constructively, we want to take part in that. We want to be doing that, but we're going to leave. You know, we're not going to have a police blotter. You know, we're not going to look to report on. You know, everybody else pretty much is covering that.
The gossipy stuff.
Yeah, we'll leave that to other media outlets. But to circle back around, so yeah, right. So I'm the publisher. As the publisher, it's my job to secure the advertising sponsorship. So I'm wearing that hat. As the editor, you know, I'm wearing the hat on the editorial side, and that's my wheelhouse. You know, that's what I've done for most of my career is edit, write, you know, produce publications, and so that's the you know, so it's a small shop, and I anticipate down the road being able to hire maybe a part-time content person, maybe a part-time ad salesperson.
Sure, it's a lot of work.
Freelancers, yeah.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's, you know, it's a small shop approach.
So what's a typical day like for you?
Good question. You know, it's juggling all the different details that need to take place any given day, any given week, and so.
So here we are, almost mid-July. So you're preparing for the August edition, or are you done? How does it work?
Yes. So this week is basically the big production week for August, right? So over the weekend, I'll be working to. I mean, I've got the preliminary. You know, all the stories are in place for August. The page layout is done in a preliminary way, but now over the weekend, I'll wrap all that up, do the design, and then get that to the printer. And the production schedule has that going to the printer Monday. You know, occasionally there's some glitch here or there, so maybe it's going to be Tuesday, but I anticipate getting that to the printer Monday. And then once it goes to the printer, you know, we generate what's called a PDF, which people are probably familiar with. That PDF goes to the printer, and then we upload that to the platform, the website platform that produces our digital edition. And so that the digital edition will get posted sometime probably early into mid next week, and that'll be, you know, August. You'll be able to read the August edition online a couple weeks ahead of time.
So how do you physically lay it out? Is it all computer, or do you do old school too? Do you?
Oh no, yeah. So it's all along.
It's not like the old days where you.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, when I worked in newspapers 20 years ago, yeah, I mean, we were working with the computers, but then it was getting printed, and there was a composing room, is what it was called at that time, and maybe they still have them in newspapers. I'm not sure, because it's been 20 years since I've worked in newspapers, but the composing room would literally paste it onto the page, and then they take photos of that, and that's how they print. So what I'm doing, it's in a program called InDesign.
Yes.
It's a pretty common. It's a good program, and so it's designed in InDesign. InDesign generates the PDF, and then we go from there.
Now, what stories are any interesting stories that you're working on, for any sneak previews that you're?
Sure. So I'll mention. So one of the kind of potentially controversial issues that has been going on here in Avon, but in there, this whole topic of the proposed development at Blue Fox Run.
Save Nod Brook.
Save Nod Road. Save Nod Road, right, yeah.
Okay.
Save Nod Road is the name. So that's the name of the nonprofit that was established and it's a group of people in Avon and beyond who don't agree with that development.
Sure.
There's another group called Build to Preserve. It's another nonprofit that is concerned that if this proposal by the current proposal, and the company, the Keystone, is Simsbury based, and so what this Build to Preserve group is concerned that if this proposal gets shot down, could that mean that more development could go on?
Oh, I get it.
Because the Keystone proposal, as I understand it, and I hope I'm not misunderstanding this, but as I understand it, their proposal is to develop a portion of that golf course, but then leave the rest for conservation. And so this Build to Preserve group is concerned, well, if we shoot this down,
then
will that mean it could be a free-for-all? And I don't know the answer to that, but these are the different perspectives. And so in any event, there was a hearing earlier this week in Avon at the middle school cafeteria. There's another one scheduled for July 23, and if no decision gets made then, the plan is that we'll have a cover story in September. So if the decision gets made July 23rd, it makes no sense to have a cover story because it's a done deal. But the plan is that we would, and again, this is planned. Don't hold me to this, but our planned cover story would be September to look at this issue and to do our best to give each of the parties an opportunity to express their views, and then people in Avon are educated and can make hopefully a good choice about that situation.
So you're kind of dipping into a little controversial areas.
Yeah, and if the decision gets made on the 23rd, then it becomes moot. And then what we would do also with that package is talk to some town officials in Simsbury and in Avon and get their take on development in their communities, and how they're approaching it. So
yeah, that'd be an interesting take, because I hear from a lot of folks about all the new apartments. And you've been here a long time. You've seen kind of the recent uptick in the apartments and development along
Hot
Route
Meadow.
10. And, of course, there's always other opinions too. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's great," and I find it hard to believe that they're filling up. But apparently, there is a need. But the Nod Brook one has been pretty controversial for quite a while. So that has you actually going out on the road to meetings and things like that, or do you have people to do that for you?
Well, I don't, but because one of the kind of the reality of being a monthly is that we're not going to be able to report breaking news, and so we are really, it's a feature-driven, human interest-driven journalism approach, which I appreciate. I've always enjoyed kind of hearing people's stories and then helping tell their stories. And so I don't really have to go to these meetings. I was planning to go Tuesday night, and then something came up. I couldn't get there. I'm planning to go the 23rd. But if I can't, it's not a big deal because I don't have to cover it for the next day, So, but I do hope to get to the 23rd just to, get a sense of what's going on kind of at the ground level. But we'll see how that plays out.
Now, are you planning to expand to other towns?
Another good question. I've had some people ask me that recently. I think this is our sweet spot.
Yeah.
I've crunched some numbers in a preliminary way. Somebody has asked, or a couple of people have asked, what about Farmington? What about Granby? Of course, that would be essentially the whole valley if you add Farmington and Granby. Then it becomes the question of, if you have to obviously increase mail costs, increase print costs, you have to increase ad rates, to cover those areas, or find some cost savings somewhere else. So I think this is the sweet spot, and I like kind of focusing on a smaller segment of the valley, and Avon, Simsbury, Canton, it's kind of the heart of the Farmington Valley.
Sure.
And so I think that's the sweet spot, and that's where we'll be for a while.
Are you going to add any new columns or focus areas within the magazine? Any as you go? Have you come up with thoughts about, well, this will be interesting for the magazine?
Definitely.
Recipes or advice for the lovelorn, or Dear Bruce, like Dear Ann Landers?
Yeah, I think probably better to avoid that one, but yeah.
Have people suggested things for you? Or have you come up in the middle of the night and said, "Oh shoot, I should do that in the magazine"?
Yeah, that's another good question. I have had people suggest different ideas, and I anticipate that we will add things as we go. We have a number of recurring features that don't appear every month, but they have appeared on a recurring basis, and some of those are honoring first responders, where we spotlight our EMTs, firefighters, police officers. Another regular feature is accent on educators. So we look at a principal or a teacher in the area. We have a noteworthy nonprofits feature.
Nice.
And so Save Nod Road was our noteworthy nonprofit feature in, I believe it was June, a couple issues ago. And no, it was May. It was May because it was the same issue as the cover story on Roaring Brook Nature Center and Jay Kaplan.
Oh yeah,
who's the
another great
director.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a great cover story. I heard good things about that. People who appreciate the work that he does.
Yeah.
And so that was a good, kind of dovetailing, save the open space issue with Roaring Brook Nature Center. So and May of this year was actually the 1-year anniversary of Save Nod Road of their. So it was a good timing as far as that goes. So in any event, so we do have a number of recurring features, and I am open to other ideas. And I have a list of several others that we may introduce.
Do people write to you a lot and say, "This is good, this is not good"?
We've gotten. I'd say
Facebook must open you up to a lot of.
Yeah. There's been a good response on Facebook. Whenever we post the magazine, the digital edition, of course, people tend to respond and say, "Hey, they'll comment on the story or just say the magazine looks great." And again, that's always encouraging to hear. And we do get letters to the editor, and sometimes I'll get a letter, an email from somebody just kind of in the course of working on the editorial side or the advertising side, and someone will email me and say, "Hey, thanks for this article," and it won't be a formal letter to the editor, but then I'll email them back sometimes and say, "Would you mind if I run this as a letter to the editor? May I have your permission?" And usually they'll say, "Sure, go ahead."
Yeah.
So and again, it's just encouraging to hear that, and so I'll say the one, and you don't necessarily. I mean, put it this way: I've had one that I can think of negative response to an article that we ran, and I won't go into the details. I replied to it, I think, diplomatically, and I alerted the contributing writer who had written, and this person appreciated the way I kind of handled it, and I think we answered the objection, and so so there are, of course, there are going to be people who have objections or complaints here or there, and of course, so you manage that as you go along. But I think the overwhelming response has been upbeat, and again, I think people appreciate having a media focus on what's going on in the community here, as opposed to again, just going back to the downside versus upside issue. Like several years ago when there was the homicide here along the trail, I mean, that Simsbury was in the news, in the TV, the Hartford TV news, and yes, that was definitely news. But is there a lot of other good Are there a lot of other good things going on in Simsbury that can be reported? Certainly, obviously, and so that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, it's very refreshing. Obviously, these days when we all want to shut off your TVs, and phones, because the national state news tends to be depressing and discouraging, and you open up a magazine and read about Jim Baldus or Flammick Farm or Mr. Benjamin, it warms your heart, and it we have such great communities and great stories and great people living here. So I think it's really a noble venture. Is it your full-time gig now?
It is full-time, yes,
Okay.
definitely. It's
Yeah,
full-time and then
imagine.
some, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And where do you work out of?
So it's a home-based, business,
okay.
yeah, and it keeps it simple, so there's not really a lot of overhead as far as that goes, yeah, and so that's, yeah, and again, at some point down the road, maybe I'll open an office locally.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Dave Richmond,
Yep.
who he owns the building right across the
Sure.
way here, and runs actually his new company, which is continuing the work he's done. It's called the Deal Team. Is his new company.
The what team?
The Deal Team.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it was Richmond Business Partners, I think, for a while, for a number of years. But our daughters played soccer here in town for many years on a travel team that had a great run. They won 3 state cups, and it was one of those deals where, again, everybody in town who has kids playing sports, that you're there every weekend or every Wednesday night,
Yeah.
Little League, and you build friendships with the parents who are watching with you. And so the Richmonds were one of a great group of parents and kids. So anyway, Dave has mentioned to me, hey, maybe you can come over, and I think he has some office space.
Sure.
He's looking at least there. So who knows? Maybe someday down the road that'll happen. But for now, it's a home-based situation works well.
Have you had a lunch party yet?
I haven't had a lunch party,
gotta
and
have
I we'll see.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. It would be fun.
Yeah.
And I remember you asked me about this previously.
Because I want to be invited.
Yeah. Well, see, the tricky thing is, so I thought about it for Canton, and then I knew I was going to launch an Avon in Simsbury, and then I thought, well, we could have 3 launch parties, maybe one in each town. But now that we've gone to the one magazine model, I guess we could still have one in each town.
Sure.
I wouldn't want to pick one town.
I know.
What I mean?
You got to have one in each town.
But yeah, I'll have to look at that. Yeah, I appreciate.
I'll come to all of them. Now, you said your website again. Can you repeat it?
Sure, it's todaypublishing.net. It's
Okay.
www.todaypublishing.
So it's just called Today now.
So now it's Today Magazine, just Today, right? Sort of like People or Time. They don't have the magazine on the cover, but then when they refer to it in print, it's Time Magazine, People Magazine. So we're Today Magazine, and on the cover it just says Today, and then it has the branding of each town. So Avon Today, Canton Today, Simsbury Today.
And when can we see the August one?
So
It'll
the
be on the
August-
streets when?
So they'll be mailed and at locations around the 3 towns. The end of basically the last week of July, the end of the last week of July. So about 2 weeks from now.
Great.
And the digital edition should be available. Again, the schedule calls for it to be posted like midweek next week. The digital edition will be online.
Perfect. Well, I'm looking forward to my next edition. It'll be great beach reading, great summer reading. I always enjoy seeing it in my mailbox, and I've been really excited following you and your great success. And I wish you really all the best as you move forward. And I hope folks will dig in and read and enjoy. And it's great to have such a dynamic gentlemen such as yourself working here in Simsbury and getting the word out about our beautiful communities. So, Bruce, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank
I hope
you,
you'll
John.
come back and
Thank you
fill us
so
in
much.
on all your successes. And to those at home, thanks so much again for spending time with us today on another edition of Office Hours with State Representative John Hampton. Till then, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.